All right, guys, Don Ford here, Progressive Insider. We're here with a COVID-19 update. I know people are dealing with all the riots going on and the protests, which are so important right now. And we didn't want to come and talk to everyone about anything other than we are ready to listen. Everyone should be ready to listen with need and what's going on there. But we also need to remember that COVID-19 is still going on. We're seeing unprecedented times with an unprecedented, totally revolting reaction from the police. What happened with George Floyd is not even unprecedented. It is totally shocking still, and it must end. I hope that people are prepared to take the action necessary. And if you will check out more of our coverage that we've been doing. We have been covering the protests, the riots, difference between the two, and really, really digging into what people can to help. So, just seeing this, look into what Black Lives Matters is putting forward to donate to, because there are plenty of places to help get people out of jail. Their bail funds. Please check those out. But right now, we are in a terrible worldwide pandemic of COVID-19. So today, I have with us two doctors who have been with us before. Lisa Peck, who has been with us, fantastic doctor. Now, she is dealing with Lake County, which has been hit particularly hard in Illinois. Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank
So,
you for
yeah.
being here. It's going to be really valuable to have your insight because since our last conversation, the situation has really, really changed. It's been very dynamic, in I would say, because were barely even beginning to see cases
Yeah.
when the last time we talked. And how many cases are you dealing with now?
Well, I my site labeled as site. So the patients that I've seen and talked to are all virtual patients right now. We were doing social distancing and separating our appointments. We've only had one doctor in at one time, one medical assistant, just to try to keep everybody safe. So now what's happening now is the state's opening up. We are starting to ramp up our services as well and starting to bring patients back into the office and trying to figure out how to do that safely. So I have not I've actually seen one person who's recovered from COVID, but I've talked to many people. And our statistics where I'm at are pretty good. We've had a lot of recoveries, and so things are winding down a little bit.
Oh, so you're actually seeing a little bit of the beginning of the first peak, as they say, right? They talk about
Yes.
having multiple peaks in this situation.
I think we've done a good job, much as we could. I think we've flattened the curve that we wanted to flatten. We have not overwhelmed our hospitals and our emergency rooms and our emergency medical services. And I think, that was one of the purposes of social distancing and masking. My fear now is that if we start to open up too quickly, that we're going to see another surge. I know we sort of talked about that before we got officially online, and I'm a little concerned with all the people running around. And peaceful protests are great, and it's sad that this is on, but I certainly support it. I don't support the rioting and the looting, but I definitely support the peaceful protests. But my fear is that with everybody running around, that we could have another surge of COVID, and we'll see what happens
Seems
with
like a
that.
big concern, and this is why this I thought this show was so we considered whether or not we go forward with this show in light of everything that was going on. And when you see so many people out there, I mean, I like I said before, I made the joke. I don't agree with James Woods often, but he did say either we're going to see a huge uptick in cases, or this is significantly less of an issue than I thought it was. And I know we're already starting to see that uptick in cases in different places. We have the numbers to support it. We're not even seeing the protest numbers yet. Uh, but we also have with us today Dr. Dylan Burdette, who has rejoined us. Dylan has been an expert virologist for us, for Insider, discussing a variety of all kinds of things going on with this situation. Really here to dispel a number of things. Dr. Burdette, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. All things considered, our city is currently under curfew. The curfew just started actually about 20 minutes ago. No one's allowed out on the streets. It's interesting times we're living in. Let's put it that way.
It is interesting for a living. It doesn't change that we're still dealing. It's like we're on double quarantine. It doesn't change
Yeah.
dealing with our initial stay-at-home order that we're winding down, but they can't make up their minds on what's what at this point. Now, what are you seeing? And you heard what Dr. said about her concern, and you've shared some concern before. So where are we now?
Well, yeah. So if we historically look at numbers from a pandemic like this, we're expecting to see multiple, peaks, is what we would call it, in cases or in deaths as well. And um, we were starting to see, upticks of that from all of the reopen protests that happened just a couple of weeks ago, and from the states and areas that were starting to reopen a little more quickly. Um, so we're starting to see an uptick in cases like that, and it really does worry me that, given all of these protests that have been happening, which, I totally, I, along with Dr. Lisa, I totally agree with. The I think that the protests are definitely a needed thing and a good thing. And given, our economic conditions, I can't really see protests going away anytime soon. Um, um, but it does worry me that, um, what we could be seeing is we could be looking at a giant spike. And if we want to talk about, who this virus is hurting and killing, it's kind of systemically hurting and killing people from the working class and people from communities of color. And these are also the people that have been out protesting. And it makes me very worried for what we could be seeing in the next few weeks.
Just on a quick, people are going to be very interested in this space. We have seen a lot of people out in mass, and social distancing is nearly impossible. What? Because it does seem like they're an excellent combo together, but either one can be relatively effective in stifling transmission. And we just tell people to do it all because they're probably only going to end up doing one of them, not have their mask over their nose or anything like that.
Yeah.
Crazy. But what do you suggest people do to keep themselves safe? Because we want, I think we need more people protesting.
Yeah.
So what can people do to keep them? Dr. Lisa.
Um, so I would say, right, wear your mask. Um, Try to be around people that are wearing their masks. If you're going to be out protesting, uh, be very cautious. Don't use bullhorns that other people are shouting into and spitting all over. Um, I mean, that's a major thing. Um, the other thing that not a lot of people are talking about, but something that I've been very concerned about, is the use of tear gas and other chemical irritants on protesters. What that does is it irritates your mucous membranes. All your mucous membranes start flushing. You start coughing and sneezing. If you're wearing a mask and you do get hit with tear gas, the first thing that you're going to do, just as an instinct, is rip off your mask, start coughing, sneezing, getting everything out. You're aerosolizing. If you are a asymptomatic carrier, it's a really great way to actually spread the virus. Um, so, I mean, this is, try to stay away from tear gas, I guess, is the best advice that I have for that.
Well, those are good suggestions. I really appreciate that. Dr. Lisa, is there anything else beyond that? Because it does seem like sticking in your own group, making sure people around you are wearing masks, and it does seem like being sort of familiar with the people with is going to, not just for safety in all regards. Really, I think. Dr. Lisa, comments on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that it protest change. It's good to do it, but you have to be careful with and masking. And I know there's a couple protests planned this weekend where they have specifically laid out rules that you must wear a mask, you must social distance, to keep people safe. I guess we don't unfortunately have control over who's going to be shooting mace, tear gas, pepper spray, any of that stuff. But as much as you can, stay away from it. And I don't know. I guess this is more of a personal thing for me, but I think if you have young children, leave them at home. I have seen people bring their young children, and maybe they don't have a babysitter to watch them, but it's just not a place for kids. I
At this
just
point,
don't think it adds. There was a infant shot. Somebody told me there was an infant shot last night. I did not see that myself, but I did tell me about that. Can anyone confirm? Can either of you?
no, I cannot confirm
Not.
that.
I haven't, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're dealing with a war zone essentially. As soon as tear gas is going out and people are shot, it's essentially a war zone. And we're even seeing war zone like wounds come out. One tip I'm going to go before we move on: if you are at a protest, bring a traffic cone and a bottle of water and put that tear gas grenade and cone on top of the grenade and you dump water into the top of the cone. Just delivering the news. Anyways, so moving on from there, we're going to talk a little bit about the big rumor, not rumor, the data coming out, which I feel like is that they're trying to say that the antibody test finally happened, showing that far more people were infected. Still a very low number, around 5% population. They're saying was actually actively affected. Some people are trying to claim this as a reason that the virus is less deadly. But uh, what do we take from that data, Dr. Burdette? Let's start with you. Where do we go? I've heard a lot of talk about different types of virus. I do notice that when you timeline, the actual lockdown started at the discovery of the virus in March. And does this sound clear at all?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is multiple strains or waves that we've seen coming out of kind of the same area, which is honestly it's not that surprising given what we know about this coronavirus and the family of coronaviruses and um, their kind of knack of mutating. That's one of their characteristics, right? So yeah, the antibody test that they developed had to be specific enough that it would not be triggered by antibodies to other coronaviruses, right? Because there are multiple coronaviruses that cause multiple respiratory ailments that aren't necessarily the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19. So it's not surprising that we would have an incomplete data set. There's few reasons for incomplete data set. The first is that despite testing finally ramping up, there's still large amounts of people that may or may not have been infected that have not been tested, right? And the reason for that is
It's nearly enough people compared to other
yes,
countries. Like not even.
exactly, yeah. And so there's very low numbers of testing. And one of the reasons for that is that when the testing first started rolling out, what the health department told everybody in their municipalities was don't get tested unless you are one of these at risk populations or you have symptoms, right? So, for people that didn't have symptoms or who may have had symptoms and they no longer had symptoms when the testing locations finally were in their area, they thought, well, I'm going to listen to the health department and not get tested. Now it's now that we've done like Lisa was saying, we've done in our area we've done a pretty decent job of flattening the curve for at least that first hump, right? But now it's really important that we do the testing and the contact tracing, which will help us kind of move forward on an epidemiological basis when we're actually trying to actively snuff out this virus, right? And keep it from becoming an endemic disease, make it a pandemic disease, which means it hits hard, and then it's gone,
Is
rather
that
than an endemic disease.
interesting? That's an interesting point right there. So I was going to get to that later on, but I think we just jump into it right now. I feel like the best way to handle this, we've done a lot of covert coverage, we've done a number of interviews with Dr. Burdette and Dr. Peck, always an excellent at that. There really a way out of this besides like stopping the transmission to the point that we kill the virus essentially inside of ourselves? Like, is there really a path forward? 'Cause we keep hearing vaccine this and vaccine that, and I'm not a scientist per se, but I definitely am aware that we don't have a flu vaccine, we have a flu shot. And I feel like there's a real distinction as another coronavirus. So the likelihood of having a vaccine likely.
Lisa, do you wanna hop in here?
Sure. I mean, I've read some of the studies they're doing on vaccines, and I know they're starting human testing. And yeah, I agree with you. It is more of a shot than a vaccine. I actually have seen personally several people this year who got the flu shot and still ended up with flu, influenza A and B. So it wasn't just one strain or the other. And I'm wondering too, with if they do come up with a vaccine for the coronavirus, is it going to mutate and the vaccine's not going to work, the shot's not going to work like the flu virus has? Is it something that has to be predicted again a year in advance to get the right strain? I mean, there's so many things involved that I don't know. I'd like to have confidence that we'll have something prevented, but I'm not sure. I don't know
We
that's
call it
not
historical. We don't make everyone panic who's
sure.
watching this. It's not
Yeah,
like
right. Sure.
we have historical data that this actually works, that you can actually snuff out a virus
Mhm.
effectively by just staying home. If your federal government will support the action, uh, but the real so that's a real potential here. That's when we talk about this like long-term structure. Now, how many people are going to have to die before we realize that's the way out of it? Now, that's more of a hyperbolic question, but
Ooh, I you know that it's a depressing question, to really think about because we've already lost 100,000 people, and as we were losing 100,000 people, there are still people that are saying that this is a hoax, that it's not real, that we should just go back to work and let everybody who's gonna die. And we've already lost 100,000 people. That is, it kind of boggles the mind, right? For me, to try to imagine 100,000 people dead, right? Like, just trying to picture that in your mind is a very difficult thing to imagine that many people. Just imagine that many people, much less that many people dead. So I don't know. I can't say how many more people have to die before everybody finally takes this seriously. I
we hear this. Oh, it's just a kind of want to dabble in a little of this, and you kind of are missing the important part of that statement. Oh no, it's just 1,000 people. That's no big deal. Somebody, and maybe we should have a psychologist on for this. What is with the indifference on those 60,000 people dying? Because it seems those are unnecessary. And is it possible that we could also like snuff out influenza while we're trying to snuff out coronavirus?
That's a tough one.
If
I
you guys
don't
don't have an answer for that,
know.
that's okay. It just kind of hit me while we're
Yeah,
talking. We're gonna move
sure.
on. We're gonna move on. But yeah, I just why do we let that happen? And could we hit goofers?
I'm
On it?
sure I answered that one.
yeah.
So
I mean,
we'll
because
come back
that
around to that. Take your time.
right.
Masks are still really important. Social distance is important. People that are being forced to read. What advice can we give them? Same advice as rioting. You're basically like rioting when you're in a grocery store. Essentially, all
Yeah.
the protesters want the same sort of real awareness of what's happening. We had 140 people infected from hairdressers. So
No.
I don't know if you guys heard about that, but we
Oh my
had
Yeah.
God. Uh,
definitely
Yeah.
140. Oh, I got a good one for you, Dr. Burdette and Peck. Uh, the hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine.
There we go. There we go. A
Oh
study
man.
came out
uh,
about that recently. Finally did a proper, real, peer-reviewed study.
yep.
They find out.
Yep. So May 22nd, I there was a study in the Lancet, which is a popular medical good journal, done on May 26th. That was reported May 22nd, and our organization, we have removed hydroxychloroquine from our list of treatments, of which there's one other drug that we're using, but and it's mostly because, well, number one, it's not a cure. It hasn't been shown to cure. And also the side effects for some people can be devastating. One of the points that we had talked about a little earlier about cardiovascular disease, coronavirus. So there is definitely an increased risk of blood clotting and cardiovascular. And on top of that, hydroxychloroquine added to that can cause fatal heart arrhythmia, irregular heartbeats that can kill.
Before Dr. Burdette jumps in,
So
my understanding of it was that the only reason we use that stuff for malaria is because malaria will definitely, but the
absolutely.
drug maybe will just mess your brain up a little.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
heart and at once. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I prescribe hydroxychloroquine all the time for people with it's used for this, for arthritis. I have patients take it for that. My patients that travel, that we use that, or which is a derivative of it, and we prescribe it for and exactly what you said, because it will prevent malaria, and you don't want malaria. But there's no evidence that it really does anything. And in fact, it's harmful.
Yeah.
So it goes against the oath that we took.
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
Dr. Burdette.
well, no, I mean, so the most recent test, the most recent clinical trial test of hydroxychloroquine for treatment of coronavirus was actually, it had to be aborted because it was killing too many of its patients. And then the even more recent test that came out, I almost got you. The more recent test.
Something terrible and it's serious. I was taking a drink of something and he almost made me out. I don't know. Got me. He knows he's bad game. Yes, sir.
But the most recent trial, I believe the one that you're talking about, was they actually tested it for use as a prophylactic, which means you take it before you get the virus, and it's supposed to stop you from getting the virus. And that found absolutely no effect. So both as a treatment,
who take this medication are still getting coronavirus, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
not like, oh, these people miraculously don't get it for some reason. At that moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've effectively shown, the science has effectively shown that it's not good as a preventative and it's not good as a therapeutic. Um,
The one thing that I read of everything I read, and I'm like I said, scientist. Other things I've read, I had read somewhere that it helped. One person said it works, doesn't think, and it helped absorb zinc faster.
yes.
That makes sense.
No, I mean, it does. It
Okay.
does help you absorb zinc faster. Yes.
Oh, so it does do. It
So
does have a
Does
sort
it?
of side long, maybe if the zinc is, and the zinc is important. But other than that, but there's better ways to do that that are less risky for the body.
yeah, yeah. If you have a zinc deficiency, it's better to just take more zinc than to take hydroxychloroquine
Oh.
to get more zinc in you.
Never bad. Like, oh no, I'll just take malaria drug. It'll be fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good
Yeah.
perspective.
Well, I mean, so I've never taken hydroxychloroquine, but when I was in Vietnam as a teenager, I took chloroquine, and I had some very odd side effects. And I don't know if you've ever, I know you've prescribed it, Lisa, but if you've ever taken it, they're not fun, weird side effects either. So yeah, it's not something that I would want to be on. I mean, that's just a personal thing.
So moving on from that, way too long. So, but in general, discussing it, going back and forth over this option, we should be talking about actual relief packages. Go about another time. But okay, so if a vaccine is we're not going to rule it out, but problematic idea. Are talking about preventative measures. So, what can we talk about that are preventative type measures from a therapy treatment perspective, or from some sort of preventative? Or any both, right? Both of those.
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead, Lisa. Go.
Oh, right. Yeah. Thanks. Well, for prevention, I had patients asking me the question, hey, what do I do now? Our governor is opening up the state. We're in phase 3. What should I be doing? And Originally we told people, well, if you're elderly, it affects elderly compromised. But we have seen younger people with no underlying contracted and die. So, what I've been try to maintain distance. That works. We know the math prevent you from spreading it to other people. We know now that there are asymptomatic shedders. We know that and shedding the virus for days after you get the symptoms. So I think it's important to realize that yes, maybe you can go get your hair cut, maybe outside a restaurant, but you still need to take precautions. And I can't emphasize enough hand washing, soap and water, basic sanitizer. My kids actually went to go get a haircut yesterday, and they only let one person shop at a time. Everybody was they were sanitizing everything, hand wash, spraying stuff, and I feel like they were pretty safe. Safe doing that. Um, what
It
what
does
I worry. Oh, go
does
ahead.
feel like total shutdown was necessary in order for us to come in and change all our practices. Seems like if we had like started these practices incrementally, never would have been effective. You have to stop everything and restart it with new rules across, which is what we're doing. And that would be the only way to tackle this in any circumstance. We'll say, oh, was the shutdown? The shutdown wasn't even necessary. Didn't need to do. No, we had to change safety protocols. The only way to do nationwide safety protocols are hey, stop everything and then um,
Mhm.
getting a lot of nods. Dr. Burdette, did you have anything to add to what we're talking about?
I just want to emphasize, like you said, when we did this shutdown, we did this shutdown for a reason. And a lot of people forget why. If we go way back, 2 months, 2.5 months, when we did the kind of nationwide shutdown, we forget why we did this. The idea wasn't that we were going to shut down until we had, um, found a cure or whatever. The idea was that we were going to shut down. Meanwhile, the government was going to ramp up its testing capability and its contact tracing capability and its hospital capacities. Then we would slowly start to reopen, right? We're
And get
slowly
everyone
starting to reopen, but
and
those
get
first
everyone
two
right?
things,
No one had masks. No one had
yeah,
masks at all. We had a
Right.
huge
yeah,
mask shortage. So
exactly,
get PPE, and that was a big thing.
yeah,
Also, people gotta remember we had to basically just like, oh shit, stop everything to get
yeah,
everything could even go.
yeah. So no, I mean that's the thing. We are reopening now. We seem to have, for the most part, addressed the supply chain issues. So now people can get a hold of PPE, but we haven't, at least on a federal level, we haven't ramped up testing, and we haven't fixed the underlying kind of healthcare issues that were leading or are may lead to an even greater second or third peak in this disease.
Yeah, if we're seeing riots on the, I know they're being triggered by social justice, criminal, basically. I thought I was gonna say something else. No, criminal police rioting, horrible, horrible situation. But this has all been a giant pressure cooker of the federal government not stepping up and protecting it. So I think
Mm,
you point. So because we're not getting those safety nets in place, we're getting additional tragedy, we're getting additional problems, we're getting new systematic issues. And that's when we can't ignore the systematic racism because every issue has a systematic racism aspect, and we cover that. We've covered that in the first with Dr. Burdette before we even were doing COVID, talking about environmental injustice. Yeah, so it was
mm,
control of chemicals. That idea makes people more susceptible. That is a big reason why we're seeing color being affected. Not to mention the underlying racism that comes from just the treatment they're receiving, because there is a whole aspect that they're not receiving proper treatment. And every horror story that I've heard, every video that I've watched to see, there's always a person of color being every time, every time. This poor Hispanic woman, this Chinese, whatever. It's always not a white person. That is systemic racism. That's why both these issues together and possible to talk about any issue of reform without discussing how it affects color else. And speaking of which, understand talking about virus when you on it, right? You breathe it out,
Pulmonary.
right? Everyone sees it like it's a pneumonia. It's not. This was, but that's actually not right. That's actually we're learning that's not correct. And some people are trying to redefine this, even though it's not technically correct. Dr. Burdette's going to help here.
Yeah.
Is that it's classified as a blood disease? Because if you treat everything as a blood disease instead of a virus, you're actually treat the symptoms that you're going. Is that did I get that right, or am I off? You guys,
Yeah.
don't tell me.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa. You answer this one first.
Okay. I would classify it, it's a viral or
Mhm.
what you classify it as, because viruses affect your whole body. So even regular fever and the coronavirus. So originally the questions we asked people, are you short of breath? Do you have a fever? That was it. And that was the very beginning. Had those symptoms, and well, I don't have enough tests. Now when we were asking them, do you have abdominal pain? Do you have a rash? And other systemic that we have found now that
COVID toes.
affects your
COVID
entire
toes.
body.
My favorite one, the COVID toes, where they're getting the
Yeah.
case. Those
Yeah.
toes are purple.
Yeah.
It's bad blood circulation that's causing
Yeah.
it. Right?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and they're seeing something like almost like this inflammatory disease called Kawasaki syndrome. Um, they're
Which is
seeing that
extremely rare. Like we know very little
it
about
is.
Kawasaki disease
Yeah.
because it's so uncommon.
Yeah.
One,
Yeah. But it is an extreme inflammatory disease or an extreme inflammatory syndrome, right? It's not a disease because we're not really sure how Kawasaki syndrome begins, but it's an extreme inflammatory syndrome, and this is what seems to be happening in some children that are testing positive for coronavirus or for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Um,
because we're seeing this pop up in a bunch of states. Now, would you say this is leaning on it's some type of immune response? Because we were in the original this. I'm not going to say the word even remotely correct. There was a type of shock that started with a K. Body talking about a lot about. Maybe we're gonna maybe this is like Carrot Cohen or something like that, where body would go into an immune response shock. Talking about that was killing lungs. That was nope, not ringing any
no,
bells. Okay,
no.
moving. So let's just get back. Let's just get back to the main idea. We are seeing these other weird blood responses, syndromes popping up that are coming up in different places. We're not even sure if these are mutations or just small parts of the population respond to it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, we don't. It's another one of those things where it's just an incomplete data set. We don't know. Um, it could be that this inflammatory Kawasaki syndrome could be how children respond to this. Could be a young person's expression, a child's expression of COVID-19, right? Because COVID-19 is just the name of the disease syndrome that is caused by this virus, right?
And
So
everyone's
it's
has a slightly different immune response show up in different fights in some people's hearts and some people's lungs and wherever it could find a home, it just replicates endlessly.
mhm,
Inflammation as it goes, which you were always talking about in our earlier shows about how this is inflammation issue. And here's another thing: how important is viral load as a concept? Because like everything I just said is a matter of viral load. Why did the woman's heart explode? It's replicated and caused a problem big enough to make it pop. So does that sound like it's becoming a more important thing now, right?
yeah. And I mean, this is what we were talking about. I remember you and I had this conversation about, people that are in a dance club could get, versus people just walking by each other on the street. If you're exposed to virus shedders, multiple virus shedders over a long period of time, you get basically more virus particles in you. That increases what's called your viral load, which is just the amount of virus in your blood, and that causes and that can really change whether you get this virus, but it doesn't infect you, or you do develop infection and start getting COVID-19.
Yeah, I had heard an interesting thing about this, and I think how the immune basically were written aren't trying to stop you getting in contact with the virus. We are just trying to like slow the rate that it happens because we're basically in this where we need people to get exposed, and this is maybe where more people are that you get exposed just like a little bit of it. Your immune develops a response that would
Mhm.
give you an immune response from it. So when you're exposed to more of it, you can handle more of it, and it'd be like taking a little bit of poison every day, like in The Princess Bride. Never mind that example. Point is,
Iocane powder. Yeah, I don't know. I get
oh, now you remember something with A. So,
it.
so, so basically, this is a really bad situation. We're dealing with long-term chronic resistance. There are people that are coming off it. I mean, not to mention people that are being on ventilators or whatever other things, but people are coming back with finding they have serious ailments that are coming off. It's just, where are we with it?
We're seeing kind of long-ranging symptoms, right? We can what we're some people are starting to call chronic long-term effects of the virus, right? And this is after your body has fought off the disease. You are, cured. We see certain neuropathic effects. That means problems with the nervous system. So, like neuropathic pain, which just means like pain that's directly in your nerves. So, pain relievers don't fix it. Or um, neuropathic disorders, numbness of the limbs. This can either be short-term thing. One of the organizers that I've been working with for a while now, her and her daughter actually were infected with SARS-CoV-2. The daughter had relatively mild symptoms. She got over it. The mother got a bit more severe symptoms, but it didn't really bother her breathing. She kind of lost feeling in her legs for a couple days, and now they just hurt all the time. Um, so
That's a circulatory issue too. At the same time, right? All this stuff you're talking
it
about, basically starving. If you can't feel something, you're starving that of oxygen. Limb.
it could be a circulatory issue, it could be an ongoing circulatory issue, or it could be a nerve issue where the nerves die. Where there could be a possibility where the nerve cells are just kind of cut off. Those responses are just
Like it attacks those receptors.
yeah. So it might not be that they're not receiving blood. That's when a healthy person
There's no
loses
method being
feeling.
sent at all.
Yeah, when a healthy person loses feeling, yeah, that's probably a circulatory issue. But what we're seeing with some of these recovered COVID patients is they're getting this numbness, neuropathic pain, but there's not an underlying circulatory issue. It's an actual effect on the nervous tissue in the limbs.
Wow, that's some scary stuff because people talk about how the it's not that lethal, it's not that deadly. We're not talking about just we're talking about we don't understand the long term damage, and there is damage. Never mind
Hmm.
the ventilator, which by the way doesn't really work. We've all learned because the problem isn't the ability for the lungs to function. Correct me on this. It's not the function; it's their ability to actually absorb oxygen. Put as much pressure in as you want, it can't take them in. So you're just running this thing. This person's going to be worn down by this, and if you can recover from that, you've now had perfectly healthy lung tissue, not healthy, but the musculature aspect being forced to do something against what it wants. So you have this additional new type of damage we're not used to from people being on ventilators. Does that sound about right, Doctor?
Yeah, know, there wasn't had a, some people there because there
Oh,
was
there's
nothing
no
else
option.
we
No
could
option.
do. We had to give people oxygen. We are unfortunately damaged. And the other thing that we're seeing now is the COVID creates a hypercoagulable state in
Yeah.
a lot of people. And so people and they think it's because of the virus damaging the lining of the blood vessel and causing your release that are normally in your coagulation system that normally help clot your blood when you get a cut or when you cut yourself, or but it's being released in massive quantities and causing actual blood clots in the lungs, in the legs, and those can have long-term effects. And there have been people that have had strokes, and those can have long-term effects as well because you don't always recover from stroke. So
Mhm.
I think that yes, the long-term impact of this is what we're going to be dealing with uh, for forever.
I've heard
Very,
stories of
very
blood
long time.
transfusion for no, they would get no loss of blood. They needed six
Mhm.
or seven a day. And some people were dying because some hospitals, I don't know if you guys know this, but some hospitals were not permitted to give blood unless you had an active bleeding, internal or external. So even if
Yeah.
you need blood, you just basically dried up on the table, it sounds like. It's, I can't even imagine what we're dealing with. So here's a question. I want to relate this because I try to simplify things to people who maybe aren't as smart as you. So thank you for being. Um, people can get cancer, right? This is probably aimed more for you. People can get cancer and they can get in organs that you can't necessarily feel. They're more internal, and that those can run rampant and go into other organs and cause really extreme damage. You don't even know you have cancer until it is far too late. It's gone to your brain. It's gone to somewhere where you can feel it. You know what I'm talking about. Colon is a big one, but there's actually I'm not very familiar with the actual name. But we have you guys. But this kind of runs the same way, right? You have this in your blood. Can't necessarily feel it in there, but it's causing these extreme issues that are compounding other issues. So it's almost like when we told people to wait to go to the emergency room until they were having extreme symptoms, we were almost giving people a death sentence because we're sending people in to long lines way too late.
Yeah. And I mean, that was that unfortunately that situation was a situation of a shortage of our healthcare. This that our a systemic problem with our healthcare system. That was
Probably
not.
all conversation. I feel like because it
Yeah.
was a failure of our medical system. Dr.
That.
Absolutely. That definitely was a failure of our medical system. I mean, we were told, we can't test anybody if they don't have the severe symptoms. And originally, if you weren't sick enough to be admitted to the hospital, you weren't even testing people.
Mhm.
Just go home, self quarantine, and
How the virus gets spread because people are like, oh, well, what does quarantine really mean? And yeah, some people take it
right,
seriously on TikTok, but what were they doing in their real life?
right, right.
Well, and I mean, this is kind of the same thing with the masks. The CDC was telling people don't wear a mask, and it wasn't because masks wouldn't be effective. It was because all masks were needed because, once again, a systemic shortage in our healthcare system. All masks, all PPE was needed to go directly to doctors and other frontline medical workers. And so for the rest of us, we were told, oh, you don't need a mask, but it wasn't. That's because it wasn't that wasn't effective. It's that there was no masks for everybody, basically.
Okay, I got to jump in on this because I got a non-doctor question. I know you guys are both active, right? Okay, how is that not propaganda? I'm just saying legitimately because there's been a lot of propaganda right now. We're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party has its own propaganda. We're dealing with Trump and their nutsoid propaganda. Then there's like several types of propaganda right there. And people go, well, it doesn't exist. And now I'm not saying this was a bad thing because apparently you got to use it good at times. But I feel like this is a clear example of American propaganda for the masses in order to handle the systemic shortcomings that we've been having to calm to prevent the COVID riots that we're seeing right now, that were coming before the horrible, horrible execution of George Floyd on Minneapolis. This was a match as a match point for this greater. Then we're dealing with well, what's true and what's not true, especially with the openings, how people are data, and so you've got to point our finger. I feel like at the thing first to say this technically was good propaganda. So don't argue about whether or not there might be bad propaganda. Am I off the hinges here? Am I going full conspiracy theory on you guys?
Well, so as far as the masks go, I don't think that was necessarily propaganda because they told us from the very beginning, don't wear a mask because it's more important for the doctors to have masks, right?
Well, the
They,
CDC they did say at one time that people don't need them. They did
yeah,
say that very blunt message. Because trust me, I read that article 600 times and had to tell everybody, look at the freaking dates.
yeah. No. They did tell people, yeah, but they told people you don't need a mask.
You
But
don't have to make excuses for the government.
yeah,
It's we know.
I'm not trying to make excuses for the government. I mean, the government has bungled this at kind of every step that they could have. And
Right.
that's not just our government. That's, kind of
Everyone but New Zealand.
most governments around the world, I would say, bungled this at every step where they could have possibly bungled it.
Yeah, New Zealand well enough that they had time to warn children that the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny were both essential workers, and that's how
Yeah,
good of a job they did. But they are an island in the middle of the ocean. I mean, they can just like, oh, stay the fuck away. Sorry,
yeah,
we're not on the live
yeah,
show. Uh,
yeah.
so, I want to go over a timeline with you because we need to wrap this up. But I'm very confused about all this data and all this stuff. But I want to break down an idea as I see it, and you guys can kind of corral in the crate, right? We
Okay.
do have data showing mutations tracked on our website. You can go and look at it. You put it up, maybe lucky, but it shows all the mutations and how far they mutate from each other. We do understand this is a mutation. No, there's no question on that. And we're also finding out that the virus was here earlier than we originally thought. Now, the first documented case goes back to November 17th, China, and not even in at least rural China. I don't even, I'm not sure where it is. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. I should double check that data. For that first case. Um, I know a number of people that have like massage therapists. They have clients from China. They had the symptoms of a really bad flu. And the
Yeah.
phrase everyone hates. I hate it too. But a really bad flu around Thanksgiving, Christmas. It went on for 2 months. Everyone said. And I've heard this story multiple times. But there's always a Chinese relative or a Chinese friend or someone that would have carried the virus directly over. So potentially, we're getting data very clearly saying the virus is here January. And so what I'm wondering is we actually had a version of the virus that was essentially, then we have another version of the virus, which is what actually really came here that we know came here in about February. And then we have a third version of the virus that shows up by way of Italy. It came off the cruise, pretty sure it came off the cruise ship, went to Italy, and then that went to New York. And then that's when the lockdown started. And now we are trying to suppress the travel of the virus in New York, same way we did it when it was in Seattle, because that was also this. Is this because
Yeah.
that would keep the antibody high because we did have this really bad thing, so a lot of people got it, but we still don't know if you get the second one, like if it makes you immune to the new one, and the new one is causing all kinds of crazy stuff, like an episode of the X-Men the way it's mutated. I want to make jokes, but it's like a new thing every day with Kawasaki
Yeah.
syndrome. Now we're calling it a blood disease. So where am I on this?
So I would say can't we can't know for sure on the dates because there's still work that needs to be done on that. But your overall picture of the travel of the virus is most likely correct from what we know so far. We do know that Type C or the third wave, whichever you'd like to call it, came not necessarily maybe from Italy, but definitely from Europe into the United States. Somewhere in Europe, we're not really positive on where it came from as far as that goes. Um, and the two initial strains, because they kind of flew under the radar, may or may not. Like I said, we don't know the dates for sure. That's going to take more time if we ever get a definite answer for that.
Yeah, people think of our medical system as some like totalitarian system that actually functions. But getting the one staggering thing that I'm really disappointed about, and it's been centerpiece in all my reform packages, that there's no universal system of medical care at all. So if you learn something that works here, get it to over here, you still have to go through all their for-profit margin share conferences in order for them to adopt a new procedure. No guarantee they even have the facility. There's no universal treatment.
Yeah.
How much has that held us back? Also, things like
Lisa?
Oh, absolutely it has. I mean, just the people that lost their jobs, the people that lost their health insurance because they lost their jobs. I mean, I remember one patient in particular called me and said, "Can you change my insulin so that I can get it filled before I lose my?" I changed her, and and then people worried about, should I go to the emergency room because I don't have insurance, it's not going to be covered, and then the government saying, well, insurance companies and the government will cover the cost of anything COVID related, but then how do you separate that out from the hospital bills? You have COVID, you don't, is this pill that we gave you, well, it's not for COVID, but you needed it, so how are we going to cover that? So it is really messed up. And I would say that this is the biggest reason why, and the biggest example of why we need universal. And I support single payer, I support Medicare for all, and I think that's what we need. And I think that see it more than ever now.
made a really powerful point. I have we put together this before. Still working on it. Happen. But the cover in exactly talking about, how we're going to get the treatment and the care and get out to people. Now, what people are forgetting is that there are people right now who are already going without insulin. There are people out there whose children need medication. There are people out there who need whatever they can. And there's some for progressives, because what I'm going to say is not popular with progressives. Carrie is already flinching and she knows what's coming, because we talk about things like Cobra and Medicare for all these things that are going on. And I am a proponent of immediately subsidizing everything into the ground. The quickest pathway to get people medical access. If they're already trying to get into Cobra, we should make Cobra as accessible as possible. If they're already trying to get in Medicaid and Medicare, make it as accessible as possible. We should be lowering the cost, carrying more of the financial burden on the federal government any way possible immediately, because there are people already going without insulin who cannot afford to get into a new line. They're already in line for their insulin somewhere. That line sucks, and it's a problem. But there's still 350,000 in line, and as opposed to 20 million in line behind they are over here. And this is just something that people understand, that when you're in a disaster, you have to have stopgaps. You have to get medication as quickly, efficiently as secondary, quickly to speed. I think that's, and I think also just by the act of doing it, I think that Americans are going to realize how important this is. And we need to pour these stories in the forefront, especially as we're raising money for people to get out of jail and all these bail allotments, all these things going on. There are millions of people going without things like insulin and die.
Mhm. Well, Lisa, I have actually a question, and to hop on what Don was just saying. I've heard from a lot of people in the community that they, even if they still have health insurance, they're delaying medical treatments or they're delaying medical appointments because they're so scared to go into the doctor's office. Have you been seeing a lot of that in your practice?
I have definitely seen people who are afraid to come into the office, and that's where the telemedicine has actually been very valuable. We've been talking for a long time about doing telemedicine, and it was something that we were planning for the future, and now it's here. And I've been doing it for the last 2 months, and I would say that for the most part it works. And it's something I think we're going to continue because even if the fear starts to go away, and it is, I actually saw a full load of patients in the office today, and I know before it was more of the telemedicine, but I think even if people start to come in, there's still people who really would benefit from that avenue of seeing their doctor. People who are, don't have someone to drive them to a doctor's office. People who are in wheelchairs and it's hard for them to get out, or people just discharged from the hospital and they have home health nurse coming but can't leave their So there's a place for it. But the fact that people were fearful about coming to a doctor's office and getting care, and it's not just the fear of the disease, it's the fear of the cost. And people were asking me too, is my insurance going to cover the telemedicine? And all the insurance companies, it took a while, but they've all agreed to cover telemedicine. But if you don't have insurance and you still have that deductible and that copay to pay, you're still paying some out of pocket.
A fun
So
thing.
yeah, so that's been difficult for people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a terrible situation that your very fun ringer totally took gravity of. I am really hoping that people can take into heart what is being said here because it's really important to think about how we can offer direct relief aid to one. And I feel like making sure people are getting every type of medicine they need and to the doctor properly and all these hoops that they have to jump through is the next form of food lines.
Yeah.
The other thing I've seen is a shortage of medication, like manufacturing shortages. I've had to
Yeah.
change a few blood pressure pills and some other pills to different brands, different types, just because of options. So even people who can pay for their medicine are having difficulty getting it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really stress with people the importance of getting out and getting whatever medications you could when this crisis started. And the few people that did follow through were like, "You really got us out of this mess." And I don't really see. Yeah, it's get in those lines, get your medication, get as far, get as much as you can right now. We
Yeah,
have no idea what's going to happen to the supply chain.
yeah.
Dr. That you had something to say?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say just from my side, I mean, I do work in that industry. I've seen our manufacturing facilities ramp down quite a bit.
Mm.
A lot of the employees have been put on furlough, or just laid off. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all that, and moving forward, we may see even more shortages of certain medications, just because manufacturing capability is not there anymore. I know, yeah, I mean, that's really what I can say from my side of it.
A lot of our drugs are imported too. A lot of them are
Yeah,
coming.
Yes.
yeah,
So that's a big issue. Not only are because I don't know if anyone has ordered anything a little bit, but everything takes like a month longer than it would normally
yeah,
because items are all under some type of federal quarantine. I don't know what is legally actually occurring there, but I
yeah.
definitely there's something going on.
Hmm.
Yes.
Guys, I think we covered pretty much everything. I think the only thing we got to worry about now the next outbreak, right? The next thing, because we are anticipating what we've all seen the Spanish flu graph, and if you haven't, go look it up. But it shows this higher peak. It's like monumentally higher than the last one. Now, hopefully, we're more educated than we were. We have better messaging, I hope, but it doesn't feel. Yeah, it doesn't feel like I got a couple eyebrows on that one. It doesn't feel necessarily like people really paid attention in history class when it stuff, and we're really repeating a lot of the same processes. What can the knowledgeable person? I mean, it seems like what can they do to prepare? It seems like the all the stuff we're doing is just practice second wave as we reintroduce people to the virus in order to gain some uh, process and help me.
Um, I mean, so honestly, there are people that are very anxious to kind of get back into, normalcy, however toxic that was for a lot of our population before we had COVID-19. There was a lot of people dying in slow motion that COVID made them die in fast motion, basically. Um, and so there are a lot of people that want to get back to that. However, there's also a lot of people who, still still are going to still want to keep up masking, keep up social distancing, keep up minimizing social interactions, all of these types of things. Um, that honestly, that's what I can say is probably the best thing that we can do right now, right? As you've noted, we don't really have a cure for this disease, but we don't have a cure for this. We don't have a vaccine for this disease. Um, the data may change as testing continues and we start to actually get a fair amount of the population tested. Maybe you know maybe what people are saying, that everyone's already been exposed and we've reached the maximum number of deaths. I don't think so, just by looking at the data of new cases and that we're seeing on a regular basis. But maybe we might reach that point at some point. But how many people have to die to get there? But yeah, I would say really what we're doing now, regardless of what the government says, may be the best way to protect ourselves. I don't know, Lisa, what do you have to say about that?
No, I agree with you. I am still recommending the social masking, and if you want to get together and have dinner with your family, just sit far apart. You know,
Yeah, yeah, I know, yeah.
what I'm telling people to do, and people ask me about going to grocery stores. Well, the grocery stores are being very cautious, and there's spacers where you have to stand in line, and they're only letting certain people in. And I think we just have to continue doing that for as long as we need to continue doing the studies to see, like like Dylan was saying, to see what the true impact is. I'm hoping we can do more testing. I've been told that we can do more testing, and that's really what needs to be done. And
Yeah.
contact tracing. I think that's
Yeah,
really
they're doing
important.
contact tracing now. You guys heard that, right? For the protesters. So, anyways, suddenly they got it working perfectly when they wanted to track protesters. I do think it's really important to say to everybody watching this that the things that the doctors, medical professionals, one of them is, the other one's just. So what is really important about this is that this is not forever. If we work together and we come together on this, this is not an issue like systemic racism that we actually have to really, really work on forever to fix. This is a now issue, here, maybe two, if we all get our business together and come together and work together and ironically not together. So
Yeah.
that,
Right.
so it's really important to keep that in mind. I'm going to wrap this up here, guys. I think we covered everything. I think we went back and forth across all the issues. I think it's really important that everyone be safe out there. It's very important that people protest. We are going to have some interviews discussing what is going on with the protests, which is riots coming up. We are still going to do more candidate interviews later, but definitely rotating over to a focus of racial injustice, police brutality. Why are the police rioting? Can somebody break that down for me? We'll discuss. That's not a question for you guys, but I'm definitely getting shakes of I don't know. You guys are both active. Dr. Peck, Dr. Burdette, I want to thank you both for being here. We'll do one at a time. Dr. Peck, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure. I hope you come back. You're always very informative on what's happening. It's so important to get somebody who's actively patients on that level, a real doctor. Dr. Burdette.
And he can answer. Dylan can answer all the questions that I can.
Oh,
Compliment each other. You need us both.
I
Yeah.
didn't like you for college. I got nothing to stand, no laurels to stand on at all. Dr. Burdette, thank you so much for being my gags. You fantastic expert. Lucky we interviewed you in January before this up. But if you want to go back, look at our other interviews with Dr. Burdette, we have really gotten ahead of the curve on something. Like we have really, I think this is something we can really talk about. We have really, you and I, we have gone way ahead of where it takes months, it took 4 months for that to catch up on stuff we were talking about. So
Yeah.
check out our other interviews. We're going to do more of these. COVID's not going away. We got to keep it up. And by all means, take to this.
Yeah.
Don't be violent. No, so
Oh, that is one more thing I just want to say about just really quick about medication shortage.
yeah,
That's
please.
the pharmacies that were destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I had a couple friends too. I have to leave the city to get medication.
Yeah, they're
That's
attacking food and medications
right.
as part of this New World Order plan. It's been pretty intense watching them find incendiary devices all over Minneapolis. Like the neighbors are finding them. So they're trying to start. But that's what everyone's been talking about that no one's really thought about is the fires, how bad the fires are because it's really out of control and the police can't get to them. So when we're talking about controlling looters and rioters, they're trying to control the idea that we can't burn down things that are necessary, but we don't need a CNN building. So just keep that in mind. I'm not. Joke. Or is it? Okay, let's get out of here before I get arrested. Guys, thank you for being here so much one more time. This has been Progressive Insider. I am Don Ford. We do have our Patreon up. We do have a Discord going. We do have a lot of stuff to get involved in. You can join our Facebook page at Progressive Insider. You can also join our Facebook group, which is our co-group. It's like their we don't have a name. The MAD group, the Movement for an American Democratic Society. And I know Dr. Burdette likes the material we push there a lot because I see him. So that's it for us, guys. The show is over. Thank you so much, Carrie. Get us out of here.